Hi everyone. In this video, we will be talking about how to implement the Kano model into your designs, as well as a general how-to guide with some tips and things to avoid. Now, the Kano model can be referred to as the Kano model of customer satisfaction, and as the name suggests, it will allow for a product's functional requirements or features to be mapped to the customer's level of satisfaction. This model works on the premise that customers typically do not buy a product just for its functionality, but also for the emotions evoked. Therefore, through utilising this model, you'll be able to identify the features with the largest positive and negative impacts on the customer, and allow for an educated budget and design decisions to be made. This is done by allowing you to evaluate each feature such that you don't need to use a more is more approach, and can instead selectively pick those with a high return potential, and avoid spending excessive portions of your budget on a feature that the customer is neutral about. If we look at the model now, you can see that the y-axis represents the customer's level of satisfaction, whilst the x-axis represents the degree of implementation. This is how well you deliver that functional requirement. Obviously, the better a functional requirement performs, the happier a customer will be. And therefore, the ideal solution will lie somewhere within this top right quadrant, as here is where your competitive advantage lies. Next, you will notice that there are three attributes listed: the basic attributes, the performance attributes, and the excitement attributes. These will be spoken about very shortly and basically dictate which functional requirements you must include, should include, or can include. To begin, we'll talk about the basic attributes. Basic attributes can be thought of as must-haves. These features are ones that define the product, and often a customer will overlook them during surveys and contextual inquiries, as they are obvious and often taken for granted. These basic attributes are non-negotiable functional requirements which must be included in the design, and often take up a large portion of the budget to ensure they are implemented well. These products do not increase a customer's satisfaction beyond a neutral standpoint. However, if you don't include them, you can severely impact your customer's perception of the design negatively. A relatively simple example of these would be a car must have brakes. A customer would not ask for a car with brakes, however, it would be implied and they would be extremely angry if it did not. Next, we move on to the excitement attributes. These represent the functional requirements that are a surprise to the customer and are typically more abstract to develop. The excitement attributes can often be referred to as delighters and essentially are unexpected pleasant surprises. If you do not include these features, you will not cause any dissatisfaction. However, when included, they have the highest potential for return. Some companies often call these unique selling propositions and help your product stand out from the rest. These attributes don't all need to be implemented and can be selectively picked. However, they should be prioritized immediately after the basic attributes. Additionally, excitement features do not need to be expensive, and if any feature can be performed at a relatively low cost, they can provide the largest potential for profit in your design. An example of this would be a complimentary gift package at a hotel. They typically don't occur, however, if you were to encounter one, you'd be delighted to have it. Lastly, we have the performance attributes. These have a linear relationship between how well they are performed and how happy the customer is. Therefore, I would suggest only including them if you are confident that you can do them to a satisfactory level, such that they don't detract from the satisfaction. These attributes are often the easiest to identify, as customers freely talk about them when asked. Good examples of this would be the length of a laptop battery life, or storage space if they wanted to optimize it or minimize it. These features are not absolutely necessary, and therefore if you have a limited budget, you can choose to exclude some of these to make way for those basic or excitement features. Now that you understand a bit more about the model, here is a general roadmap you can utilize in order to implement the model into your design. It is important to note that this is just a general suggestion, and there are multiple different ways you can actually utilize the Kano customer satisfaction model. To begin, you need to make sure that you've compiled all your functional requirements and are happy that they completely represent your problem in a solution-neutral way. Next, put yourself in the customer's shoes and ask yourself two simple questions. How would I feel if this functional requirement was not included? And how would I feel if this functional requirement was included? These two simple questions will actually allow you to complete step 3, where you categorize the requirements. Basic attributes will typically cause unhappy responses, such as anger, frustration, or annoyance to the first question, and neutral responses to the second. Conversely, excitement features trigger delight and surprise to the second question, and neutral responses to the first. Now, if you find yourself answering these questions with a response like, depends on how well it's done, or does it do it better than others on the market, then you're typically looking at a performance attribute. Now, in this, I've actually included a fourth category. This is in the case you identify a functional requirement that triggers a neutral response to both questions. This means the customer does not care if it is included or absent from the design. These requirements should be disregarded as they simply increase the cost of production rather than increasing profitability. Finally, once you've categorized the products, you can start to evaluate them and prioritize which functions of your device are non-negotiable, and then allocate budget to develop them accordingly. All of these steps are a really good idea to include in your design journal. Now you've planned out your model and you've popped it in your design journal. It's time to clearly present it and your findings in your preliminary design report. A few tips I've picked up from previous years that I would recommend are: firstly, to actually include an image of the model itself in your report to allow a visual reference when you're explaining your results. Secondly, to clearly present your functional requirements with respect to their corresponding attributes. Tables and dot points or lists are all really useful ways to highlight these decisions. Next, you need to make sure that you provide justification for your decisions, particularly if these are not common sense, and if possible, link these to your market research. And finally, you need to draw conclusions from your model around the key functional requirements, and also try to relate any findings to your long tail model, which will be explained in another video. Furthermore, when presenting your results, try to avoid having functional requirements appear in two categories, as each functional requirement should relate to only one of these attributes, so pick the one that it relates more closely to. Additionally, don't try to hide your results in long-winded text or scattered throughout multiple paragraphs. Try to present the information as concisely as possible. Lastly, as you're working as a team, it is expected that different people may do different sections. However, be careful not to contradict one another and ensure that your market research, functional requirements, Kano model and long tail model all relate and support one another. To conclude, the model is relatively simple and typically most teams do it really well. However, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to your demonstrators or to the forum spaces, and we'll be sure to help you out.